Welcome to the Queen City Music Podcast, the podcast devoted to the local music scene in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, here's your host, Matthew Ablin.
Hello, and welcome to episode 80 of the Queen City Music Podcast. This episode of the QCMP is sponsored by Midwood Guitar Studio, Charlotte, North Carolina's own boutique guitar shop located in Plaza Midwood. Midwood Guitar Studio not only has the finest selection of boutique guitars, but familiar names like Fender, Martin, Taylor, Two Rock, and many others. Whether it's a guitar, bass, amp, effects pedal, or a much-needed accessory, the knowledgeable and friendly staff at Midwood Guitar Studio will help guide you in the right direction for your next purchase. And Midwood Guitar Studio also has a luthier on staff for all your guitar repair needs. Visit their website at midwoodguitarstudio.com or stop in to see their unique shop at 1517 Central Avenue, Charlotte, North Carolina. By the way, if you have a business and would like to become a sponsor of the podcast, like our friends at Midwood Guitar Studio, drop me a line at qcmusicpodcast@gmail.com and I'll discuss all the information with you. Also, if you enjoy the podcast and want to find out more about me, stop by MatthewAblin.com. There you'll find links to my events calendar, performance groups, the latest podcast episodes, and a host of other information. This month on episode 80 of the QCMP, I'm speaking with Flame Tides, a heavy groove duo featuring Hayley Moran on drums and vocals and Rocketman and McNeely on vocals and guitar. Flame Tides, welcome to the Queen City Music Podcast. How are you doing today, guys?
Fantastic. Happy to be here.
All right, guys, I've got Hayley Moran and Mike McNeely, otherwise known as Rocketman from Flame Tides, here with us at the Queen City Music Podcast. So, guys, I start the questioning out the same way for the podcast. Are you originally from the Charlotte area? Mike, Hayley?
Not originally born, but I grew up here since about 84, so since I was about 4 years old.
Oh, you've been here, yeah. Well, you're a Charlottean pretty much.
Yeah, I had a past musical life in Houston, Texas, but moved here in 98.
98? So when you guys got here, there wasn't really much of a music scene. Not that you guys were that old when you moved here.
Well, when I was 4, I really didn't get out that much.
I was in the scene from the time I was born. All right, so what's your musical background, Hayley?
So I grew up playing guitar. Both my parents could play guitar, and my dad was in a band in Texas, and just acoustic guitar, playing folk songs, cool. Bob Dylan, Peter, Paul, and Mary, and I started playing electric guitar for the first time, and that's when I joined my first band called Shot Silk, and that was like 2011.
Okay.
And then started dabbling with the drums. You know, I really enjoy music in general, and was always a little bit more of a percussive kind of player.
Right.
And so it seems like it translated to kind of make that change.
What was there something that attracted you to the drums? Did you get into it in like elementary or middle school when kids start band or stuff?
You know, the one memory that I have was a few of the kids in like 6th grade, you know, tapping on their desk, making beats on their desk, and I was always kind of intrigued by that. So like in the privacy of my own space, I would go see if I could tap out some beats myself, and just having fun with that. And then just thought it would be good to try to play around. Mike got me a drum kit at some point, and just sitting down and seeing what came out.
Cool. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, my parents were not really musical. My dad was an evangelical pastor, and so I played a little acoustic guitar, and they would have me like help with worship at the church and stuff like that. And then later became friends with guys who had just awesome album collections. So you'd go over and hang out and listen to like 2112 or when the first Van Halen record came out, everybody seemed to have a copy of that.
Yeah.
You know, check that out. And then later, you know, guys like Stevie Ray Vaughan, U2, stuff like that. Just the sound that I was captured by was the guitar. Just what is this thing?
Yeah.
And then finally talked my parents into getting me an acoustic guitar, and just took off from there. Started playing when I was 13 and never stopped.
Yeah, I always tell the story of how I got into rock music. It was like, I remember my brother borrowed an album from my cousin. It was a compilation recording, and it was called Heavy Metal. And the needle dropped, literally, because record players back then, on Iron Man by Black Sabbath. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
What was that?
That guitar is massive.
Yeah.
If you've never heard something like that before. Yeah. Same experience where you're like, what is that? And then when you discover what it is, like, well, I need one of those in my house.
Yeah. I need to make that.
That's a sad thing about today. That's a sad commentary. I don't know if people listen to that and get hit with that same, like, what was that sound? Let me Google that and find out what that was. And if you're a kid back then, you could just be like, I don't know what that is. This is a big mystery.
Yeah, the mystery. We young people today miss out on the mystery a little bit.
I have a grandfather on my dad's side, and, all he ever listened to was like old Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson kind of stuff. And I was trying to find out. I did play him something, and he said whatever it was, it sounded like it was something broken. I was like, okay, well, I want something broken then.
There you go. That's the way to it.
My parents loved the Beatles, and so there's some mystery and all of that music.
Gosh, yeah.
So fascinated me growing up.
You start getting into the White Album and all those sounds, and you're just like, what is going on here?
Yeah, you're tripping without having to partake in anything.
Masters in the studio before there was like studio,
right?
Stuff going on.
Yeah, and the execution of the singing and the playing was just so masterful with all those bands. I have an aunt, my mom's younger sister, and she would send records, and she sent me, I think, one of the most popular Moody Blues album, but she also sent me Dark Side of the Moon on vinyl. And I'd never heard anything like that before. And I listen back now and just still am amazed at the musicianship, the execution, and the creativity. The songs are absolutely stunning. They hold up so well.
A lot of that stuff always strikes me. It's today's musicians, we have the ability to record digitally, and we go in and we do stuff over and over, or adjust vocals with auto-tune. And you think these guys were doing this stuff like straight.
Just full live capture most of the time.
Re-record it, hit it again. I'll just do it until I get it. Yeah. And I've got it. And today it's like, we do that in 2 takes, whatever, we'll adjust that later on, which is kind of crazy to me. It's like, think, Did you guys, I went to see, I don't know if this ever hit you guys like that, but so I went to see Journey a couple of years ago with the quote unquote new singer, Arnell. And so I don't know why it just hit me strange, but he was such a fantastic singer. And I was like, man, this guy's just great. And he's all over the stage doing his thing. And then it hits me. I was like, but he's doing Steve Perry stuff.
Right.
Like, how good of a singer was Steve Perry? If this guy's copying his stuff, like that guy, just, oh my God.
Yeah.
The originals, the innovators, I mean, that's what I'm super into Hendrix right now. Like, that's kind of been lately, my deep dive is Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan. And a lot of it is just because you look through that lens of knowing nobody having done that before.
Yep.
And then you experience that music differently when that reality hits of like, this is, The Wind Cries Mary, something like that. These little blues hammer-on chords, just real simple, but nobody had been doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite musicians is Tom Waits, and just loving some of his, knowing that he's using boots, with, stomping sounds and random sounds and pots and pans and stuff like that.
Did you ever see, you mentioned that, did you ever see that, it's a Howard Stern thing with Steven Tyler from Aerosmith? And they're talking about one song, and he's like, my shake or something happened in the middle of it. So he's like, I took some sugar packets, and you can hear on the recording. He's like, that's what that is. And Howard Stern's
cool.
like, what? And he's like, something happened and the thing broke. And I just grabbed these sugar packets and started doing it. I'm like,
that's it. That's music. Everything could be music.
Yeah, it's the little things in life. You're like, oh my gosh, where would you come up with that kind of idea? Or there's a story of, Judas Priest, and they're doing that song Metal Gods. They're like, what does that sound? He's like, that was just a tray full of silverware.
Yeah.
We drop it up and down, and you get this pounding sound. I was like,
it's like the Beatles on Get Back. I'm like, hey, that's an actual hammer with the
anvil in there.
An anvil, yeah. It's like they're actually hitting an anvil with a hammer.
On Maxwell Silver Hammer?
Yes, yeah. It's like, that's just the sound. That's exactly what the sound is. And you see it in the video, and you're like, oh, yeah, okay, I know that sound.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Someone had to carry that anvil into the studio.
Right. It's a precursor to sound design stuff today, where we're getting filmed and everything, people doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
Crazy. All right, so we digress. How did you guys wind up meeting and putting together Flame Tides?
So I'm a tattoo artist, and I've been tattooing in Charlotte since about 2001. And Mike came for his first tattoo, 2 full sleeves. We did a consultation and began this process of this journey.
Nice work, by the way.
Thank you. Creating this story, this personal story. So getting to know each other through the creation of the artwork.
Okay. And then you're talking music, and then
so I'd built a brick and mortar studio, and didn't have a lot of cash, and found out that she was in a band, Shot Silk, which was.
I thought you were going to say, and then I found out she had a lot of cash.
No, I didn't have a lot of cash, but I really wanted this artwork, and I was going to the best. And so when I found out that she had this band, I proposed that, hey, what do you think about doing a little bartering, and we could make you guys an EP, and maybe I could get my sleeves.
And even really before that, or initially talking music, was that I got my first electric guitar and was looking for an amplifier.
Oh, that's right.
And I needed some help figuring out what would be the right piece of equipment for the sound that I was going for, and he was very knowledgeable about that. So
cool.
He turned me on to the Buddha Super Drive.
Okay.
I played that in that band.
Yeah.
It's a great little amp.
It is. It is. So then you guys were playing together in this other band that you had, or did you talk about, putting together something as a duo? How did that?
At that time, we played a couple shows. His band was Deep Sky, Deep Sky.
Yeah.
And so we shared the stage a couple times, and then he would sit in on a couple songs, but mostly it was just kind of us individually doing our thing and sharing conversations over the tattoo work.
Yeah. Yeah, and talking creativity. So we hadn't thought at all about. I sat in on maybe a couple songs live and enjoyed them. It was hard. Hayley very much thinks way, way outside the box, like rhythmically and melodically. So it was a real challenge, even as a pretty well accomplished guitar player, to try to figure out what was going on inside her head with these guitar lines,
What are you doing?
I was like, I'm pretty sure that's like a 7/13 time signature.
No steady beat, Taylor. What's going on? I need this. Yeah. 4 on the floor.
Where's the one? Where's the one?
And so that was with rhythms on the guitar.
Okay.
Finding this, almost played the guitar thinking of the riffs more in a lyrical melody type of rhythm. So it would change. Yeah. It just changed a lot, know, but I knew exactly what I was doing. But it ended up that we just started playing a little bit, kind of more and more here and there, and started a kind of middle ground project called The Waves.
Okay.
Where we figured we might sit with a few different musicians.
Yeah.
The Waves could end up being, it's us with Deirdre Croner as the singer. Okay. She used to play with Grown Up Avenger Stuff, if you remember that band.
Yeah.
And had a drummer, played some songs out where we were both singing and playing guitar, and then it just, life shifts and changes us, and we formed Flame Tides. What year was that?
So
2015?
2015 is when you kind of start experimenting more with the drums, and then I had bought that baritone, and I was like, I have an idea. I think we could just try this middle ground of guitar, bass, with like a big drum kit, and just see what happens.
And essentially for playing the drums, for me, I would really just sit down and see what can I do? Mm-hmm. What feels like a beat? How do I keep that going?
Right.
And then I would come up with something, and then I would share that with him. Here's this beat. What do you think? And that would make him kind of play outside of his normal box, and we would pretty much gel on a section of a song and be like, we just need to capture that real quick,
right.
And just jamming together.
So was the idea to always, did you always just want to do original stuff? Did you get out and do some covers? And was the idea always to do a duo? Or did you guys want to add more people and do a fuller band?
Definitely always original. I think it's more exciting and more fun. I never really want to put myself in anybody else's box.
Right.
So, but we did find that it was just naturally so easy as a duo.
Yeah.
To make it happen.
And once you got the baritone in the mix, it's kind of hard for a bass player to jump in, but it's also kind of hard for a guitar player to jump in, because your tuning is a B2B,
Yeah.
It's a totally different tuning.
I don't know anything about baritone guitar.
Yeah. So same, it's a 6-string, or the one I play is a 6-string, but instead of being kind of an E to E standard tuning, it's same intervals between the strings, but it's B to B, so a whole fifth lower.
Why the baritone guitar?
Well, I was kind of thinking it'd be fun to, like, one of my favorite bands is King's X. Yeah, right. And so if you listen to Doug Pinnick, to me, what carries that band is Doug Pinnick's bass lines.
Yeah.
You know, it's all this movement. So Ty, the guitar player, ends up moving his guitar around these bass lines. And most rock bands do the opposite. They've got a guitar player who writes a riff, and then the bass player has kind of got to do the Michael Anthony thing underneath where they're just punching out quarter notes or something like that. So I thought it'd be really fun to write in a different way. Think more like a bass player, but see if you can create a guitar aesthetic out of those lines.
Okay.
And so that evolved over time, from being just the baritone, which was in the key of B, kind of a root note, so it's automatically lower, to we really got crazy, and I've got a split rig system that takes that baritone and half the rig, drops it through a POG octaver, drops it down, and I run it through a mini SVT.
Nice.
So I've got a bass rig on one, doing the subs, the way low end, and I've got the mids and the highs rolled off. So it's just like this really big foundation underneath. And then the other goes through a more traditional kind of guitar rig, and just a real nice natural overdrive. And we started combining those things, but a lot of single note runs that are more like a Doug Pinnick kind of run with chord punches thrown in there. And then if there's leads, it's usually something that's like sustained, you've either got something that's moving like old school blues players where you've got like a line underneath that's very simple, and then the solo is kind of a plucked thing. And so we have some of that, and then we're just off and running at that point. And it was too hard to add anything.
Of the sound with just two of us, it felt like streamlines our approach, and it was a lot of fun.
The videos I checked out online of you guys, it was a full sound. I was like, wow, wow, for a duo, these guys are sounding really, it's hard to fill out that sound for two people, because the duo I play in, we do covers. It's an acoustic duo with me and my friend John. And if it's one thing I experienced from going solo to duo, trio, being in those different units, it's a different thing to try to fill sound. Like I always felt with a duo, I don't know if you feel like this, Mike, you're trying to fill sound and you try to fill the space so that it feels like more people. And I'm sure even with drums, you're trying to, how do I fill out this space to give it more of a thicker sound?
For fullness.
Do you guys struggle with that at all, or because of the setup that you have with the baritone and the double rigs?
It's got some balls to it. So.
It's pretty massive sounding.
Yeah, I don't think we're searching. It feels full from the stage for sure. Definitely a lot of commentary. It's wow, I can't believe that's only two people making all that sound. So. Yeah.
Are you singing with the crew too at all, Hayley?
I do a little background vocals and a couple lyrics here and there.
Okay.
But, and originally we started out mostly just playing instrumentals because he had been singing so much in Deep Sky and just interested in the freedom of just playing.
Yeah. And are you using any people always laugh at me, but it's fine. Or it's either people are like, oh my God, or wow, that's crazy. I use a vocal harmonizer called a harmony singer. So you can add harmonies on top. So you've got, you can go up a third, a fifth. Yeah. You can add lower stuff, and it really helps to fill out the sound when you're playing.
That's pretty cool.
That was amazing. Yeah, I heard a clip of that Norwegian Wood that you did, and I could hear the harmonies, and I was like, man, that sounds really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing the things that they come out with, but just those little things as a soloist or in a duo, you're like, how do we do it? Because like you guys, listening to you, it reminds me with me and John, it's like people come up to us like, it sounds like there's a lot more than two guys up here. And we're like, yeah, because, if I'm playing guitar and singing, he's doing harmonies with me, and sometimes I'm doing harmonies in the background with my harmony singer. He does the same.
Oh, cool.
Or John he's playing, a multi-talented guy, he's playing drums and then he'll throw in harmonica, or something else just to
real nice
fatten up the sound.
Yeah, and give you some dynamics.
Yeah,
that's really cool. Yeah, so we're a little bit of a paradox in that we like the technology in terms of being able to run an octave lower and have this split rig, and I've got a pedal board that's pretty complicated. But minus that approach, it's really the idea that we've created a pretty small box that we're in, and we don't actually have the harmonizers or anything like that. And it's not that we have any issue with that. It's more of a fun process to see, with these constraints and limitations, kind of a Jack White approach to the music. What can we create, and how do we stay artistically relevant and expressive? How do we express new emotions without adding layers of loops or other tracks or things? Back in the early 90s, you'd go see a show, and I'm like, their background vocals are on tracks. You can tell. Now they got the harmonizer machines, but there was a time where they were on tracks. And to me, it sounded great, but to me, it robbed just a little bit of something. Like, I want to know that everybody is really working hard to create that emotional transfer with the music at the time. Now, the harmony machine to me is a very different thing, because you are generating that in the moment, so it's only triggered because of you expressing an idea. Yeah. So I kind of like that a little bit better, but we've never really messed with that. And we've kind of stayed very simple, other than the complex rig and a giant drum kit. She's got this huge, we call it the big truck. She drives the big truck.
Well, I think it depends on, the artist and what you want. I mean, some people are Robert Fripp and they embrace every bit of technology and they utilize it. And then some people are the Black Crowes and they're like, no. All we're doing is on this stage is pushing air. You will not find any electronics or backing tracks or anything. Right. But then there's groups like, I remember hearing an interview with Rush, and Geddy Lee said, they're like, well, are you using these backing tracks and stuff on stage? Not for vocals per se, but for, rhythm guitars and stuff. Like, yeah, we do. And we found we could bring other people with us, but our fans just want to see the three of us. Oh. So they are very forgiving that we are going to use this other stuff because they don't want 5 or 6 people on a Rush stage. They want to see the three of us, and that's it.
Yeah, we felt that way a little bit about Black Keys, who is another one of our favorite bands, and they do listen
not use tracks. Them when it's just them too.
Yeah, and now when they tour, they have a very large entourage. They've got a lot of people on stage now, and I have mixed feelings about it.
Yeah, I remember the first time. Back in the 80s when Pink Floyd got back together and they were doing a tour, and I was like, is this really Pink Floyd? There's like 18 people on stage with them to do, but it is what it is.
Yeah. We do kind of like the just rawness, which is part of why we do original material and not trying to rework somebody else's songs, and just kind of seeing what comes out. And that's the more natural that is. I think the more freeing it feels to try to create there.
You have to do what works for you guys and for your music more than anything else. If this is what works for your music and you can pull it off without anything, great. I mean, there may come a time in the future where you're like, hey, let's introduce that backing track on the computer and see how it works.
Right. I am definitely trying to practice singing more and playing the drums, which is a fun challenge.
There you go. Oh my God, yeah. I have enough trouble with that guitar,
I don't know how anybody does. You remember that band Cowboy Mouth?
No.
They had Jenny Says, from the 90s. That guy, his drum kit, he'd set it at the front of the stage. They played a lot of festivals. He would play the front of the stage sideways, and he would be playing like a madman, and he sounded great singing too. And I just remember thinking, like, that's next level. That's like a whole anybody who can like keep track of all their limbs moving in all of this very specific kind of timing and be able to sing a melody line is pretty impressive.
Well, now that you brought it up, I'm just curious. Hayley already said, there's some stuff playing and singing that's tough. How about for you? Is there difficult stuff? Because I know being a guitar player, there's stuff where when I'm playing with my duo, with my friend John, I'm like, why don't you sing this one? Because I can't play and sing this guitar part at the same time. Is that difficult for you at all?
There's a few things that are a little tricky. We have this song called Holy Grail that has got some very complicated chords that are way up high on the neck, like they're like 14th fret kind of area. Yeah. And and I've got these melody lines that just demand a lot of attention. And, I'm so used to, I realize I cheat all the time looking at my guitar. And while I'm singing those lines, I can't quite see that. And so it's not, it's an act of faith, like that my fingers are going to land where they're supposed to land. But there's been a couple times where like the stabs are bad and I'm like, oh, I don't know about doing this.
Well, I know just doing covers sometimes. That's the tough thing, because it's like I'll have to change a rhythm slightly so that I can sing it and play it at the same time, because maybe that singer was not a guitar player,
Yeah.
And they're just like, I can't do that.
I think especially live, there's something that happens when you have to think too much.
Yeah.
And so, creating songs that are more instrumental or have more space around them just feels like you can get into that energy more and get out of your head space.
Yeah.
I enjoy that. We now have kind of picked our live set based on that exact experience. There's some songs that I think are good songs on the records, but they are a little more frustrating to play live. And I'm like, we don't need that. Nobody knows these songs anyway. So we just pick the ones we want to play.
That's hysterical. So let's get into it. So you guys are together as duo, but before I forget, I wanted to ask, the duo thing, did you get influenced by like the White Stripes or the Black Keys and say, well, there's already a platform, somebody's already done a duo thing. We can do that too. Does that?
I think knowing that those exist was definitely kind of backing to feel like, we can totally get away with this, but not necessarily like, let's try this thing that we have seen. It really just naturally was like, we're making some pretty good songs and it's just the two of us. So let's just keep trying that.
It actually makes it a little more democratic and easier, because there's two people making decisions. You're like,
exactly.
Do you like this? I don't like that. Oh, let's do this. Okay, let's try that.
Yeah.
And you start throwing a third personality or a fourth personality. Right. And then not to mention schedules for gigs.
Yeah, exactly. We live together, so that makes practice real easy too. Hey, you want to play tonight? Yeah. You want to play? Okay.
Piss me off. I'm going to play this part a little harder on these drums.
Yeah. We always have one fan who comes down and watches. Our dog comes and sits on the porch.
That's great. So when did you guys, you got 2 recordings out currently. So when did you, which one came first?
Thunder Love is our first album.
Okay. Yeah. And when did you guys release that?
It was 2019.
Yeah, March
of 2019 was our CD release party at the Rabbit Hole. And then, pandemic changed everything in 2020, right? So we ended up taking that time. My studio was closed and everybody was at home and everything. We're like, let's make the most of it while we can, while we're at home together. Let's put some tracks down and try and record our second record.
Yeah. So we slow rolled that and just kind of got the tracks that we wanted with the takes that we wanted and did the pre-production kind of live. So like we'd have the studio rolling and a lot of the pre-production was just recorded and some of the stuff. In fact, American Dream is just a pre-production jam. We were just checking all the mics and we recorded the whole song just jamming together, and that's what you hear on the record.
Where did you guys record? Did you record at home? Do you have a recording studio that you do everything with?
Yeah, we do.
Mm-hmm. Super cool.
We've got a nice, really nice all analog setup. I've got a Toft console. I don't know if you know. So it's Malcolm Toft built all the Trident stuff back in, so it's like a lot of David Bowie, a lot of Pink Floyd, all recorded on Toft consoles.
But I'm starting to sense a theme here, Mike, with like old school stuff. I'm like, got this digital recording. I'm like, I just plug straight in this. You're like, I've got a console. I'm using amps.
Lots of knobs on that thing.
Yeah. Well, the engineer side of my brain loves just that old technology and what it's doing, and the idea that you're moving electrons through these various components that do things to it, but it's the original whatever you created, like a handwritten letter. You read a letter, you're seeing a transfer of the medium, the pen, ink, And so I kind of think of electrons that same way. So if you're staying in the analog domain, it's like that handwritten letter.
Well, that begs the question. Were you recording when you were younger? Did you have like a 4-track? Because I know friends when I was younger had 4 tracks. I never did that because I wasn't like, I'm going to write all my own songs. I was trying to figure out how to play a freaking guitar. And I was like, how do I copy these licks?
Yeah, I always had like a 4-track, like a little cassette 4-track.
That makes sense.
Thing, and playing with it. When I was in college, I had a buddy who had one, and as soon as I started messing with it, then I always had one.
Yeah.
And they're great songwriting tools also because you can try different ideas. And with, if you've got 4 tracks and you're a guitar player, you can play your rhythms, you can play textures, you can play leads, and you just start seeing, you experiment. I think I became a better guitar player by experimenting with how textures work together. And then you realize like, oh, you can't have the guitar frequency spectrums be like super low end and super high end. It doesn't sound right in the recording. So you kind of naturally begin to learn like just even instrument placement in a recording, and panning, volume, frequencies, and just slowly by osmosis, you pick that stuff up, and it's, I think, a more natural endeavor later on if you've kind of learned it that way.
There's really nothing like hearing yourself back from the outside back in also to help you maybe tweak a few things.
That's true. I mean, I'm just thinking like your entryway into it is older, where I didn't start recording until I got, I think, oh my gosh, the first recording software I got. I didn't do a 4-track. I got Cakewalk back in the day.
Oh yeah,
then
Steinberg
I got it,
stuff. Yeah.
And I got frustrated. I couldn't get it to work, and I was like, rah. And I brought Pro Tools, and it took me years to kind of get through that. But my point is, my entryway was digital, so I'm not like, oh, I've got to have this console. I'm like, well, I'm used to, looking at it on a screen. So it's a different aesthetic for me. And that's the way I've kind of navigated into that field.
Yeah. I think as soon as you have a drum kit, it kind of changes. It really creates a huge, number of track demand on your recordings.
Yeah.
And so, for me, I learned on a console with drums, playing in bands and doing with tape and everything. Yeah. And so it just seemed like a real natural way of like, okay, you got, this is your kick drum beater, this is your kick drum front head, right. And then you just build all that stuff together, and then you kind of recreating that drum kit sound in the recording. But with all these multiple tracks, it's amazing how much control you have.
That was probably one of the most challenging things that I witnessed, though, because you have to get your microphone placement just right to capture these sounds, these drums. And I've got a 26-inch bass drum, so that thing puts out a lot of reverberations, and so there's all these different the bleed over certain microphones, and really kind of getting that where you can actually capture that sound is a whole process.
Are you doing any of the recording and yourself too? Like, did you get into recording stuff because of Mike? Are you
really just learning through our recording process together and paying attention and seeing what it took? Yeah. It really changed my outlook on the whole thing. And we knew that we wanted to record specifically for vinyl for our second record. Okay. And that required a certain other kind of angle of the way he thought about how to actually capture those tracks.
Yeah. It's a whole rabbit hole to go down to. If you haven't, Mike's probably a little, more advanced than I am with all that stuff. I haven't done it for years. I'm like, it sounds like I've been doing it for a long time, but I'm kind of still like a newbie. I'm still learning my workstation and stuff. So if it's a rabbit hole you're going to go down, you're going to be like, oh my God, there's so much to learn.
Yeah, it's too much. I'm more of the support person so that I can witness. I'm the critical witness.
Just like, I just want to be here and part of the process.
I just want to play.
Yeah, well, there's a certain freedom to that also. When we did Thunder Love, so I've got a good friend of mine out of Austin he works professionally in the music field, and he produced some albums back in the 90s, a band I was in Houston, and I just called him and asked if he'd be willing to come up and help us do our first record. Okay. Because with just the two of us, it was just going to be a lot harder to drive that whole system. And so he came up and really helped us. I think he set the tone for a simple way of recording. Simple is not really all that simple, but like using a lot more room mic kind of sounds with your drums as opposed to doing a bunch of closed mic. And then I really love that sound. And then I realized so we're both Zeppelin fans, and it's mostly room mics that you're hearing with those drums. Yeah. And it's the fact that he's turning all of these individual drums into one instrument and the way they record. And so that we tried, especially with the second record, we really worked hard to get that aesthetic to tape, which is, it's not a snare and, three toms
Everything,
and a kick drum. It's one instrument and you want to hear it that way.
Yeah.
And so her job was really to keep the energy level up for the takes, because you can have a fantastic sounding recording, but if you don't have a good delivery of energy and and that pocket and everything that it takes for a great song, and I'm convinced more than ever, all great songs, if you could distill it down to one thing, it's usually the drums are going to be the thing that keep you moving. You can almost eliminate anything else and replace it, but you can't do that with the drums.
Right.
And so it was nice.
No pressure.
I was like, I'm important.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, it was a lot. It was a fair amount of pressure, but it was good that's back to kind of the commentary regarding the studio, is that she didn't need to be there with all the knobs and the sliders and everything, because she was able to stay in this other headspace, which was very much kind of the creative headspace. And then the nice thing about having our own studios, we could record multiple takes, old school, kind of like the Beatles did it. Like if we didn't think something worked, we didn't go back in and try to edit it. We just re-recorded it.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about a home recording studio. Not to mention, like, if you can get a good solid recording, I mean, you don't have to go to a studio. The only thing that's better about going to a studio is that somebody else is pushing the knobs and doing all that stuff for you, and you can just concentrate on playing. Be like, no, I'm just going to do this.
Right. Yeah. The facilitation, I think, for him, in some ways, that was what was awesome about having Brian Jones come up from Texas for that first record. You had to do more work the second one.
Second one took a lot more. Yeah. Now you're split focus, so you're trying to be left brain and right brain all at the same time, which is can be a little bit. Feels a little schizophrenic at times.
So with the thought process behind the drums, how many mics are they putting on the drums?
So I don't know how much of a deep dive you get into technical stuff, but
I mean, usually you're not putting something on everything is my point.
Yes.
You're not using 16. You're not Neil Peart. I need one for this hi-hat. I need one for the snare, and I need for this.
So I would say 80% of the drum sound is coming through two overheads that I use in a Glenn Johns method.
Okay.
So, you've got one, and I always use dynamic mics too. So I've got these Sennheiser E906s that I really, really like. They're very, very forgiving. And I'll have one placed kind of above the floor tom section, and it's just looking across the kit from the right hand side.
Yeah.
And then I've got the other one kind of up high over the snare, just pointing right at the snare, but it's picking up everything. And so it creates a stereo image, but not the stereo image you would get like when people mix individual drums and you have drum rolls that sound like they go from, one side of your headspace all the way to the other. So your stereo field is collapsed a little bit with the Glenn Johns method. But then to enhance that, I'll have individual beater mics. So I've got 57s usually, like SM57s on the tom.
Classic mic.
Heads. It's a great mic. I mean, it's hard to mess that mic up. And then I will work with the placement and the phasing and the panning to match the Glenn Johns headspace. So like if you've got a stereo image that has a certain kind of drum sound, I try to make sure that the toms are placed into that same space so that they are enhancing what you're getting with the room mics as opposed to an individual like cannon shot. So it's really just built to get the attack on the drum hit, but it's really all about the room sound.
Okay.
And then we've also got one extra room mic in a different room.
Yeah. Like 25, 30 feet away.
Okay.
And then that's a condenser because it's the only thing that will pick up that distance. And it's line of sight down a hallway and another couple of rooms to the drums. And then that mic is absolutely cranked. And then I run that through an 1176 compressor, and then I crush it, and it gets very distorted. And you take that underneath your mix and you bring that up, and what it does is it makes the drums sound huge but just with one extra microphone. What a lot of that is just the distance.
Right, talking about filling that space.
Yeah.
That's the way to kind of capture that
Do you
depth
have
of field.
Any specifics that you like to have with your drums when you're recording? Like you've got to have. You talked about having that big bass drum. How many pieces is the kit that you're using?
I've got 2 floor toms, so it's like a classic Ludwig bottom style kit. And I got some chimes. I like the chimes a little bit.
Okay.
That is one thing I feel like it'd be fun to have as many different sounds as possible, like you were talking about earlier, the hand drums and whatnot. But it's a lot to have to wrangle.
Yeah.
So I keep that. I got one little kind of couple trashy, splashy cymbals, and I play the dark K cymbal, so there's got a really kind of ballsy tone to the cymbals too.
So are you really picky when you're recording your parts? Are you that person who's like, nope, do it again. That wasn't good. I don't like that. Let's do this again.
No.
Because as a duo, you're driving everything.
The drums really, to me, I love the instrument because it feels playful. It feels like a dance. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to feel like I'm really feeling it mostly, And then there were some key things that I would know that my mind wanted to do and maybe my body didn't do it. Okay. And so then I might say, let's try that one more time, but.
So do you have the guitar parts recorded first, Mike, and then Hayley's listening to everything? Or are you going in and saying, okay, she kind of knows what it sounds like. Here's the scratch of it. And then she's got to come up with different parts?
No, we kind of drive the bus the other way. And that is we usually will have a pretty good idea of what a song is already. And then the idea is to capture drum magic first. Because that, to me, again, back to that philosophy, I think that any good song distilled down, it's the drums. And so we built the record that way. So the drums get tracked. I use I've got a rack mount pod amp. Yeah. And I go direct. We have a monitoring system with their headphones. And so, that way I've got no bleed on the drums. It gives me maximum flexibility with the drums, but we're playing live. Okay. And we do track the pod. Yeah. In fact, it's really interesting. The American Dream, again, on the album, is the pod, which surprised me that it worked because I thought I was going to go back in and retrack using my much higher end amps and stuff. Right. And the stereo imaging and all that kind of stuff. And just nothing sounded as good as the original take. And it was a single take of a jam. We hadn't written that song. We just played it. And so that's a good example of how you just take the drums and build from the bass up. And then other songs like Broken Stars, she captures that energy, and then I'll go back in and just replace the pod recordings I'll just retrack, using, my Shivas and the SVTs, the Ampeg. Okay. And I record all that at once. So there is a live component to it. Like I'm not recording separate bass lines and separate guitars. It's just like we would play it live. And tracking. And then sometimes I'll go back and do one additional guitar track if I'm wanting something to be a real wide image. Sure. So if the drums are here and I want the guitars to tease you out here, I'll go ahead and layer in some texture or a stereo image of something that's a double take so that it's just got that real natural kind of sense of space. Great.
Well, you guys have mentioned it a couple of times, American Dream. Can we take a listen to it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. This is American Dream meets Quarantine by Flame Tides off the recording Bonfire Tsunami.
Buckle up, kids. I'm going to tell you a little tale. Don't jump the gun. It's 3 a.m. somewhere. Nobody to be seen on this dead-end street. Following a backseat driver down the boulevard. Just 2 shakes of a lamb's tail past the intersection of Independence and Quarantine.
So hey, tighten up. Ain't no high fives. Let's nip it in the bud from the get-go. Out of sight, out of mind. Like 6 of one, half a dozen of another. You know, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. They say an apple a day keeps the doctor away. XOXO, you
up Jump Street. As the sun dives deep into the sea.
Guys, I really like that track a lot. It's track 5 off the Bonfire Tsunami. So before we get into the track, I'm looking at Hayley and I'm looking at Mike. And tattoos. Hayley, did you do the artwork for the cover? I'm thinking you did.
Actually, that is a painting by a friend of ours, Giovanni
You just
Uloa.
blew me out of the water. I'm expecting Hayley with all the artwork. She's doing all the artwork for everything.
You know, sometimes it takes a village, and so
it's a beautiful cover.
It just, you know, he helped us do the layout, and he's been such a fantastic just friend, creator, and he had this one piece of artwork that just looked to us exactly like the Bonfire Tsunami flame ties, the blue and the red, and like kind of like an oasis out there in the desert, and it just seemed perfect. So.
Well, you guys in the audience can't see, but I'm holding their. Hayley brought me a copy of the album. God, I can't even tell you the last time I had a record in my hands because I'm a CD guy. You come in my place and you see like, you know, a couple hundred CDs and you're like, oh my gosh, this is great.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing you miss from being a kid. Yeah. And you're like, oh, I can't wait to tear this open and see the pictures of the band and what's going on in here. You know, it's great stuff.
Yeah, we really did want to make it that whole experience when you open up a record and then there's lyrics in there and there's pictures from vacations and stuff that you wouldn't see anywhere else, and we're really proud of him.
Yeah, if you want to see the studio, just open it up in the centerfold, folks. The picture in the.
I do, but I don't want to. There's this thing. It looks so nice like this. I don't want to tear the plastic off and mess it up.
Tear it off.
Oh man! Oh no! You're gonna make me do. All right, I'm gonna have to look because it's pretty cool. You can hear all the tearing. Wait, this is an unwrapping video. Should have brought my camera and put it on YouTube.
You can see on the back of the album that's our studio space where we play in our home.
That looks great. Oh, that's fantastic. Wait, this is your studio space?
Yeah, that's our studio.
Oh my gosh. This is beautiful. Well, I've got a lot of updating to do, guys. Thanks. That doesn't make me feel good at all.
That's a really cool, like almost 360 type of capture by Bjorn Foster Photography.
So it automatically strikes me looking at your studio space, recording stuff. I don't see a lot of sound panels and stuff like that. Am I missing something?
There are some there.
Or are they just hidden by like tapestries?
So you've got some on the ceiling. I don't know if that photo actually shows that. You can kind of see
on the couch there.
That.
Yeah.
So that's a tall ceiling in there. I think it's about a 10-foot ceiling, which is really nice for recording drums. And then where we're sitting there, when we're tracking, the drums are usually there because that gives us line of sight for a room mic that goes down a hall and. But it's not as convenient for rehearsing. So that's really kind of the rehearsal setup that you see there. Okay. And the corners, we got some corner bass traps and we do have some panels around that maybe only just a couple feet up, some traps. And that's just really to keep the room from reverberating. And it sounds fantastic down there, but it doesn't sound overly dead. A lot of studios, they'll really just try to capture everything. And we've got a lot of furniture, and we've got bookcases with a lot of books, you know, just some natural breakup of the sound waves. Yeah. That to me, my ear tells me that that's a more natural sound than kind of an overly suppressed environment where you're just soaking up all the sound. It just doesn't sound that natural to me.
I'm noticing on your pedal board you've got a POG or two.
Yeah, I got two of them.
I actually use one, so when I'm playing, I will use it with distortion and I'll turn up the bass end. Yeah. And it sounds like a keyboard.
Yeah.
Like you get this like Emerson, Lake and Palmer kind of vibe.
Also a synthy kind of, that's why it's funny you say that because I don't like most octavers that I've heard. They sound a little sterile to me, but the POG has got this syrupy kind of sound that like it's almost got this syrupy zip thing that's happening down at the low end that I really like.
It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
Do you put any effects on your drums at all? Going through anything?
Nope.
No, just straight up playing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, just playing.
I mean, when you do it, sometimes it's neat to kind of try some different kind of effects with things.
Yeah, you know? I mean, I really do like, you know, I grew up, I like techno music, so I like some of those funky drum sounds and, Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and all of that. And so like my mind wants to play around with some of those. That could be the next evolution, as we continue to create new music and exploring some of those territories and, making it.
There's a song on the record called Broken Stars. Uh-huh. And there's a middle section where it's just a simple kick, snare, beat, and everything else drops out. And if you play that song, you listen to it, you'll hear what I did is I emulated When the Levee Breaks.
Okay.
So I took a tape delay, and I've got a little microphone that's sitting kind of between the snare and the kick drum. And that goes through tape delay, and I use that same kind of slapback sound that you hear on that.
Yeah.
And so that's if we end up playing that later in the podcast, you'll end up hearing that in the middle. And so that's about the most effect that we will do on the drums.
Right.
All the reverb sounds that you hear are really the room and that thing we talked about earlier, that room mic. So we create space. We create space with the physical space.
I was going to say that big sound on the Levee Breaks. I think that's just from the house they recorded in. They recorded it in the stairwell, so that was just. So
what they did is they put the kit in the stairwell, and so you get you get a little bit of slap from the stairwell. But I've read a ton about this because I was curious about it. And they took 2 ribbon mics and they hung them directly over the drums. So it's a 2 mic setup for the drums. So you get a little bit of a stereo image. And those are run through an actual tape delay. And he combined the tape delay to accentuate the slap that he was getting in that stairwell.
Such a genius.
It's actually it really was a genius move. And I mean, it's probably the most sampled drum sound of any rock band ever. It's everywhere. You hear it in hip hop. I recognize, I'll be listening to a song. I'm like, what? That's When the Levee Breaks.
There's so much little stuff. I saw a little clip, me watching too much YouTube, and somebody asked about, well, I shouldn't bring it up, but whatever. Sting was asked about one of his songs that P. Diddy had sampled, and they asked him, "Is it true Diddy's got to pay you $2,000 a day?" He's like, "Yeah, he didn't ask me to sample my song and then get
that's right.
permission." And he's now, since he took the song, like, got to pay me every day.
Yeah.
So we worked it out where he's got to pay me X amount of $1,000.
Yeah, there's like deeper story there.
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder
today's current state of affairs.
Right. I wonder if Vanilla Ice is paying Queen for Another One Bites the Dust. Like you think about those early samples.
He got sued years ago.
He tried real hard to say there was like a subtle.
He was like, "No, there it goes, dun 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 dun. There it goes down. Mine goes up."
That's right. It's under pressure, not Another One Bites the Dust. Under pressure. Yeah, I forgot that line.
Too funny. Yeah. So tell me about the songwriting process as we're talking about. We've spent a lot of time talking about recording. What is the songwriting process like for you guys?
A lot of times we'll just play around with whether he's got a riff or I've got a beat that I'm messing with, and just try to capture some live jams. And we just do that on our phone. Yeah. And a lot of times, I mean, many of our songs will be almost like we listen to it later and think, that's the order. That's the song. Yeah. We pretty much now can just kind of dial in some things, but wow.
Yeah. Desert Trip was that way. So we had seen this, what are they, like Bedouin musicians or something? I can't remember exactly.
Oh yeah,
Tanarwin. And they have this really unique approach to using electric guitars and kind of Western instruments, but with these like Saharan desert kind of sounds. Cool. And so we just started messing with this idea, and it became a recording on the phone.
Yeah.
And then every time we messed with the song, we would end up coming back to the recording, realizing that's the song. And so we recorded it. You relearn the jam, basically, is what's happening.
Yeah, relearn the jam.
So there is a little new school, new school tech here.
Yes.
Well, anytime we've got an idea and anything is working, I mean, there's hundreds of recordings in here.
Capture it or you lose it. What was that thing I did last night? Oh, God, I don't fucking know.
Right. So we hit record and just throw this thing in the room.
We'll go back and listen, and we'll be like, oh, well, starting at, a minute 5, that's where
the only time the only bad part is figuring out what you did.
Yeah.
Like, how the heck what did I do? How did I play that?
Yeah. And when you say pretty much our second album, the recording was finalizing the songs in that recording process. And then to play them live, we had to learn our songs.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so you go from the jam to getting it just enough that you've got the frenetic energy that carries it for the
freshness.
recording.
Yeah.
And then you have to learn the album to play it live.
But you said there's still songs you don't play live. So, I mean, I guess it cuts it down. You're like, all right, we know our set, and we're good to go. Mm-hmm. Who's doing the lyric writing? Who's that about?
Mostly Mike.
Yeah.
I think. I definitely play around with poetry and lyrical writing, so I might have some ideas, or he'll, we'll be talking through what are we really trying to say here, and so I might have some ideas that I share, but mostly he's got the lyrical content going on for now. Except that American Dream Meets Quarantine song, I was just thinking through these kind of catchphrases and typical things that you hear all the time. 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. And like,
catch a tiger by the tail.
So I was just like brainstorming, writing all this stuff. And like, I think I have a kind of lyrical structure. You could do a line and I could do a line, and like, there it is.
It's not easy writing lyrics. Like, I mean, the stuff I wrote on my EP, I think I'm like, oh, okay. I think I've kind of got a handle on this, but sometimes you start writing stuff and you're like, you realize, oh, just because you write it down doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah.
That's right. It's like you got to feed through, this is the crap, and how many times you scratch this out, this doesn't make sense, and come back. And
we've got a fair amount of songs about just kind of our life, a couple attributed to our dogs.
Yeah.
And so that's just, our world. When you're listening to our music, you are really, some of them are lofty concepts, but a lot of it truly is just like our experience and some of the things we just think about and talk about together.
I think if you write what you know and what you've experienced, and you think of it from the perspective of how there's a certain emotion that I experience when I'm thinking about what it is that I know or that I've lived through. Is there a way lyrically to distill that to the emotion of it? And then transfer that through those lyrics in a melody line, and that really becomes the basis for most of the lyric content.
Do you guys like veiled lyrics? Like it could mean a lot of different things, but I know one of my songs that I wrote, it's about. It didn't hit me until later that it was like really more about death, and then the things you talk about, and then it could. I shouldn't say this, but I will anyway. Okay. It sounds like it's about a friend dying. It was actually about my cat.
Yeah.
The cat died, and I was like, it could be.
Yes.
It makes it more universal,
right?
So that anybody can do it. It's not. It's personal, but yet it's not personal. It can be anybody can apply it to them,
because you want people to be captured by it. So there has to be some kind of recognition in their own.
We have a brand new song that is that exact story. A pet, our dog that has passed away. He's on. If you see that centerfold, you see the picture of him on the couch with us. That's Mojo. He has since passed.
Okay,
and we wrote a song called Bones. He ended up with osteosarcoma. And one of his big legs broke, and found him in the kitchen, and he was just on the ground, just suffering. And that became a basis later, once we kind of processed that a little bit, and it became a basis for this song. But the song is universal. You could hear it and not think that it's about a pet necessarily. Yeah. But for us, that's where the emotional power comes from, is that connection. And for someone else, I think the best lyrics are adaptive to a person's experience.
Yeah.
So the transfer of emotion to your personal experience, so it becomes a subjective experience in the song.
Yeah. And I think it's hard for singers when you're doing stuff, if you're writing lyrics, and I know some of my favorite bands, like Geddy Lee has talked about how Neil Peart used to write all the lyrics, but he would have to kind of say like, I can't use this, I can't use that, because it's not me. No matter, even if it's personal to you, I've still got to be to sing it, and I've got to be able to make connections with it.
And emote that.
I don't know who Bytor and the Snow Dog is.
What are we talking about? So that's just the way it works.
We do have on our first record more of the talkbox lyrics, so you kind of can't really tell what he's saying exactly, and there's something kind of fun about that. We do have some of them written down. But like Purple Cow is essentially kind of based off this idea from when I was younger. I remember coloring this cow. And I just like, in my mind, I was like, and I asked my dad, do I have to make this brown? And he said, no. He's like, it's art. You can make it purple if you want to. You can do whatever you want to with it. Exactly. And that set with me. And so he sings these lyrics about me and creating art. And it's really kind of fun and weird. And you can't quite tell what he's saying, but.
Does he mention purple cow?
Purple cow.
I say purple cow a lot.
Purple cow's the
now I'm going to have to go listen to that album, guys. Thanks.
But it's, through a talk box. So it's got that Peter Frampton kind of thing that's happening. Yeah.
Oh, that talk box is never used enough. I can only think of like 3 or 4 songs off the top of my head. Some Aerosmith stuff, Peter Frampton.
You're right.
Maybe
It's such
Motley Crue.
Such a cool sound, and you really don't hear it much. So a lot of the songs on the first record have the talk box more than Bonfire Tsunami.
Yeah, Bonfire Tsunami's got a few. But they're more like a wah effect and not so much the lyrics, because we decided to just make it a more lyrical album.
So since you guys brought it up, what is the difference between Thunder Love and Bonfire Tsunami? What has the writing process changed? Has your approach to recording changed? Has the lyrical or musical content changed? What's a change for you guys between the two?
Yes, the answer is yes. Really, I mean, I think it's the most, Thunder Love really is the rawest capture of us creating what Flame Tides really is. Okay. It's the first set of songs. And when we recorded that one, I was not super comfortable playing to a click track either, so I'm not playing to one in the first record, and I am in the second album. And we knew specifically on the second record it was not only more of a kind of refined Flame Tides, I guess. We also knew we were going to create it for vinyl, which was a little bit different, and then we did send it off to Abbey Road to be mastered.
Wow, good for you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, Ole Morgan, he works for Abbey Road. He does stem mastering, which is a process that takes, kind of like your 4 most basic sounds, and then they're not mixed because they're pre-mixed, but they're individually mastered, and it makes the vinyl so rich. It just sounds so 3-dimensional.
Right.
Yeah. I think and also Thunder Love is, truly you were not trying to write a bunch of lyrics and put your voice out there like that. So it was more playful, and this one is, I'd say it's more thoughtful, but it's maybe more crafted.
A little more deliberate, I think. Yeah, the first record, so many of those songs came from literal jams where it's just a couple of riffs strung together and us turning everything to 11. And this has a little more dynamics, a little more refined in terms of song structure. So you've got, you'll have some intentional intros and verses and bridges and things like that, where Thunder Love was a little more like whatever's next is next.
Can we listen to another track from Bonfire Tsunami?
Yeah. Let's
okay. What do you guys feel like listening to?
Well, we can listen to Broken Stars. Yeah, that has has that When the Levee Breaks kind of effect on the drums in that section. Yeah, it's very subtle, but you'll hear it.
All right, let's take a listen to Broken Stars by Flame Tides off the recording Bonfire Tsunami.
And wonder who we are. I stare up at the Milky Way and feel so very far away and close to my home. The mysteries that dance beyond whisper to me here. The gravity of dying stars, a nursery for the here and the now. Broken stars, we come from broken love. We are the sons and the daughters of broken life. We come from broken stars, we come from broken love.
Guys, another fantastic track. Really digging it.
Thank you.
what is, how did the songwriting for this track come about?
So Broken Stars was one. So I had played in a previous band called Deep Sky that was just a fair amount heavier. Still a lot of King's X kind of influence stuff, a lot of grooviness. But the vocals were very kind of in the Chris Cornell range and just very taxing. Mm-hmm. And so I had begun to write some songs that just didn't strain my voice so much. And Broken Stars was one of those songs that I had worked on, but it never ended up being a Deep Sky song. Okay. And when we were working on this record, I had played it for Hayley and she really liked it. And so we ended up really turning it into a Flame Tide song. So it had a pretty different kind of feel. And so we gave it the jam treatment, which was, there's a little more structure because the song existed, lyrics exist, melody lines exist. But then we just jammed through it and really found what I felt like was, well, you've heard it on the record. I just feel like I think that's the right interpretation of that song.
I had heard that song. You guys played that live before, right? Yeah. And so we really wanted to, I wanted to not hear what they used to do in some ways. And so just sitting behind the kit and asking him to play and let me just listen and think about it. And it just kind of got me playing this little quirky snare thing. And he was like, that is totally different than anything that I ever thought of, but I like it. Let's go with that.
So did anybody from the old band call you and be like, hey?
Thankfully I had
got the rights to that.
yeah, I'd already...
You're the songwriter?
I had written it all, so it really wasn't an issue. Yeah. But those guys are fantastic. I mean, Jim Gray, Kevin Luke, great drummer, great bass player. It was a fun power trio. I really enjoyed it. I mean, great material. We have a record that's out.
It's a great album.
It was really good as well, but just very taxing and hard to find a place to do that. To play like that is kind of hard. Rock and roll is a little bit of a dying breed.
I'd be really curious to hear the original compared to what you guys did and how the reimagining of it is.
Yeah, the reimagining. Yeah. Was there any? There might be a live clip or something. Maybe.
Yeah. We never recorded it. It wasn't a band favorite, even though I loved it.
Flame Tides really allows you to kind of have the more intimate delivery of some of your deeper thoughts than Deep Sky kind of allowed for. So there's a little bit more like you're playing in this, in the inner reaches with the way it sounds now versus kind of more of this bombastic kind of a thing that was going on with the Deep Sky version.
So Bonfire Tsunami came out in 2021?
So we recorded it during the pandemic, and then the vinyl pressing took forever. There was so much backlog
because of the pandemic.
Because of the pandemic, and so we didn't end up picking up the record from the manufacturer until December of 21. So it came out in 22, even though it was finished and in the can basically in 21.
Okay, all right. So I'm thinking the digital age that we live in, the way the music industry is now. You guys have 2 full-length recordings.
Mm-hmm. We do.
Why are you choosing? And I think I already know the answer, but I'm going to let you guys answer it for me. Why are you choosing to do full-length recordings rather than like the current thing, which is, let me rephrase this. What you could do, which a lot of bands are doing, is you've got Bonfire Tsunami's got 10 tracks. You guys could have released 3 EPs, or 10 singles over the next couple of years.
Yeah.
As opposed to, hey, we're going to release a full-length recording.
We really did struggle with that a little bit, thinking about, like, what is going to make the best impact? Yeah. Are we going to release this entire album and it's going to kind of go nowhere because people don't have the bandwidth even for 10 songs these days? Yeah. But to kind of cherry pick and only do one at a time, I feel like it felt, we already had all this material. Yeah. So, an album has this entirety to it, to kind of the arc of your life when you're creating this music. Right. And so we wanted to, I think, let that be, especially since we recorded it during the pandemic, shut down, and it just felt like it was a unified kind of a thing. Now we might do it a different approach now coming up, just trying to work with, what makes the most sense to release music. But
well, I mean, I will give you this. It is powerful that the Hayley came in with like, here's our record. Like, it was just like, oh shit, this is really cool. It's pretty cool. I'm cursing on my own podcast and I don't do that. I'm like, but I was like, shit, this is freaking cool, you know? And I'm like, all right, I like this. So there is that impact of, you know,
that's good.
Hey, this is real.
It feels,
this is not
good.
some, you know, thing on the internet. I'm looking at a screen like, there you go.
It's a little bit of a way to differentiate from everything else that's going on. And once you embrace the idea that, you know, there's no real money in music, so then it distills it down to like, what are your values? What are you hoping to accomplish in this little blink of an eye of living during this environment in which this kind of product is not really necessarily valued? What are you trying to do? And so then it becomes a question about art.
Yeah.
It becomes a question about what are we trying to express and what's important about expressing it? You know, what's the medium that we think would be good? And we both thought like, well, a vinyl record, it was the obvious choice. The first one was on CD, Thunder Love on CD. We basically give those away now at shows because people don't really, they look at it and it's a little bit foreign. A vinyl record seems to be more recognizable at this point to people than a CD.
Yeah.
I'm still a CD gal myself. I got a CD player in the car. Yeah. But a lot of people don't, they're like, I don't know how to play this. We're used to that.
I grew up with records, of course, but when I made that transition to CD, and maybe I'm just awful like that. One, I still love a physical
same
product.
Absolutely.
I don't want to be like, oh, my music got lost because my hard drive got broken, or
I can't get on the internet, so I can't listen to music.
Yeah,
no.
And then the other part of it is, I went through a thing when I was in graduate school. I sold a bunch of CDs, and I regretted it. I was why did I get rid of, like, I had stuff like some Mahavishnu recordings and some stuff that I loved, but I was just like, I'm not listening to this, because I went through this phase where I was studying classical guitar in graduate school and college. I was like, I'm just listening I'm a classical musician now. I'm not listening to this stuff. And I got rid of it all. And then it took me years to get all of it back. And I'm like, I'm never getting rid of these CDs again. I will keep them forever, you know?
Yeah.
So,
at the house, we have it's a 200 disc changer.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And we have like an Excel spreadsheet printout on the wall next to it so that we know what's in each one of the slots.
Oh,
because otherwise it's impossible to remember. And we'll swap them out periodically, but it's the.
So I got cabinets, 10 towers and towers of CDs too.
Her CD collection it's bonkers.
Are you is it very eclectic? Like, do you have a whole bunch of different stuff in there?
Yeah, very eclectic.
Was it range
somebody
from?
asked me just recently what my first CDs were, and one was Vivaldi's Four Seasons.
Great recording.
And Metallica's Black Album is my first two CDs back in the day.
I still buy stuff.
But
you know?
I've got all Tom Waits collection for sure, all the Led Zeppelin, you know. I used to go to the CD warehouse and just go through the like dollar CDs also and just pick and find new music that way. Sea of Souls is one that I remember really liking. I have not followed their music or know anything about them. But
that one guy.
That one. Oh, I saw him at I can't think of the name of it in Noda. But anyway, have you ever heard that one guy? His name? He made this pipe, big,
super weird, eclectic, super cool,
stunningly odd instrument that he slaps and plays, and you'll just have to look him up sometime. It's like a one-man band, but real.
He just shows up in Noda and plays, or does he?
He tours around.
Yeah, he's been touring around.
Is he a street performer, or is he does events at like the evening?
No, he has to to have a decently complex PA system, because I've never seen anything like this.
Fat City. That's where I saw him the first time. Fat City. That's what I was trying to come up. It's not around anymore. That was like the spot in Noda on Davidson and 35th Street, Fat City. It's
I remember. When was it around? It was probably before I got here in 06?
Yeah. Oh, maybe so. You might have just been on the verge of it going out.
Wow. I feel like I've been here for a while, and like people mention stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. And now you're like Fat City. I'm like, well, thanks. You know, I'm not an old school.
You probably remember like Tremont Music Hall and some of those venues.
Yeah.
That Double Door.
Yeah.
Sad to see that.
I remember one of them. I was only at the Double Door once or twice, and the last time I was there. I don't know if you've heard of him, is guitar player Eric Gales.
Yeah, oh yeah. Fantastic guitar player.
Dude, I watched him. He was From Me to You, and like nobody was there. And I got into seeing him when he started making his comeback, when he started getting his act together, and there was nobody in the club seeing him. And when he played the Double Door, he had a really nice crowd, but I was able to stand on the side of the stage and just watch him play. And I was like, it's fantastic. And now, I go to see him at the neighborhood theater, and it's getting bigger. Yeah. And then I saw he played at the new venue, the Kane Center for the Arts up in Davidson. Yeah.
Joe Bonamassa's really helped his career. Joe Bonamassa's a huge fan.
Yes.
And they did that really cool video where they're just like shredding with each other, but it's not like 80s shredding. It is like such good blues guitar lick playing. It's unbelievable what those guys do.
The difference is, I mean, I love them both. For me, Bonamassa is a better songwriter.
Yeah.
Like his songs are more solid. Mm-hmm. Not that I don't love Eric Gales. I'm a huge Eric Gales fan. Eric is a better player and he's more original. Bonamassa, being a guitar player, every time he plays something, I can go, that's from Eric Clapton.
Yes.
That's from Eric Johnson.
Yes.
That's this, that's that.
He's great at emulating those riffs and taking them kind of to the next level.
Yes.
Whereas Gales kind of has that Stevie Ray Vaughan thing where you could hear a new song and go, oh, I know that's Eric Gales because of that sound.
Yes. Yes. And the other thing with Bonamassa, he's a fantastic performer. If you've ever gotten to see him live, every time I go see him every year when he comes to Charlotte because he does something different. Mm-hmm. It is not the same show. He has different performers with him, or if he has the same performers, he's got a different setup. Like one time I got to see him and he did the acoustic set. The first half was acoustic and then he did electric. Mm-hmm. And then another time I saw him, he was really pared down. Like he had hardly any pedals and he had a brass section with him. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, he's always trying to do something different with his show. And so I have no problem going to see him and spend the money. I'm like, I know what I'm going to get. And he's fantastic. He's a great player.
Everybody that plays in his band also is like, it's a clinic. When you listen and watch any of those guys play, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, I got to say, I became a fan. He did a PBS special. I bought the DVD of Live at the Vienna Opera House. So it's all acoustic. So my first introduction to Bonamassa was hearing him play acoustic. And when I heard all his songs done electric, I was like, I don't like it. I wanted the acoustic versions, And then I was
the Bob Dylan backlash.
Yeah. And only in the reverse, right? Because you knew what Dylan the song sounded like before. Right. But, and then, another one is Live at the Borderline where he plays in a trio. He's got Anton Fig on drums and this bass player, Michael Rhodes. And I'm like, oh my God, please go on tour with just a trio because you sound amazing with just the three guys.
Yeah, that's like John Mayer. When John Mayer did the trio, it's about the only thing I heard that I really liked of his.
Yeah.
Because it was just much more stripped down and you realize I never knew that guy had been so into Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yeah.
Because his early records were all kind of pop and not something I could get into. Now, it was amazing playing, but not anything that I was really that into. And then I heard the John Mayer trio and blew my mind.
Yeah.
And then he was doing the Dead and Company thing. Sounds fantastic.
I mean, he just figured, okay, man, I'm going to make my money. I'm going to do this and put it out. And,
he can do whatever he wants now.
And now he's got his cred. Like when you say I can't play guitar, I just went on tour with the Grateful Dead and I played and I shredded every night for 3 hours.
His amplifiers cost more than my car.
God.
Yeah. He plays those two rocks, which is the Dumble, basically a Dumble Phase 2 and, outrageously great sounding amplifiers, but I don't know how people afford them.
Yeah. Have you guys seen Christone Kingfish?
Oh,
he's another blues rock player.
No,
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
very young too.
Yeah. big guy, really big, but just you watch him, I'm like, I'm gonna sound awful. Please don't take me the wrong way, Kingfish. He's a very large guy, and he's young, and I'm like, please lose that weight because you are so good. Right. You need to stay around. Right. Like
have a long career.
He reminds me of like Bonamassa and Eric Gales put together because he's an amazing player, but he also writes good songs.
And he's got
so I think he's got a good career ahead of him.
Yeah. And his playing is so good, and his voice, there's very few, even Bonamassa, for me, it took me a while to get used to his vocal delivery.
Yes.
Because I was a huge Eric Johnson fan, and it took me a while with him, same thing. And then you kind of get used to that reinterpretation, a softer interpretation of kind of like the Hendrix thing.
Yeah.
And then Bonamassa was even more refined than that, and it was just hard for me. I was like, where's the grit, man? Where's that? And then Kingfish, he's got that grit.
Yeah. I did go to see Eric Johnson play. Yeah. I'm not a big Eric Johnson fan. I don't know how
you had to see him 20 years ago. It was a very different experience when he first came out.
Yeah.
When he first came out, he's always just played in a trio, and he was living the Hendrix dream. In fact, he'd even wear that Hendrix jacket.
Yeah.
And it was fire. I mean, it was just so intense. I'd never seen anything like that before. It was so good. And then I saw him years and years later, and I felt, again, that guy has thrown down the gauntlet for himself that he has to recreate each night. And I imagine it would get a little old over time to just, play Cliffs of Dover and have to play these like super
shredded,
articulate, I don't know, 64th notes or whatever it is in that song. Just crazy fast riffs. And these are all these these 3-note per string pentatonic runs that are very, very, very difficult.
Well, he came recently, the last couple of years, and I went to go see him. So he had an acoustic set, and then he did an electric set. And I liked his acoustic set more. I thought it was deeper. And I found, and I could be wrong because I'm not a fan, and I don't want to slag anybody. He's an amazing musician, amazing player. But I just got sick of the cascading arpeggios, whatever he does. That thing is just like, hey, here's a lick, here's a lick, and I'm like, dude, all right, it's kind of. It's like hearing Bonamassa do it, and you're like, all right, stop doing that. It's like, stop.
Got it.
Maybe play something a little more like Clapton-ish, which has got that slow hand, kind of a lot of melody and feel.
Yeah.
I feel like we're just talking all kinds of guitar players.
Sorry.
We should be talking. Let's shift to John Bonham.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like you start to hear certain, but it's all music, and Hayley's laughing and she's like, but she hears it too, I'm like, I'm not just,
Yeah. What you're making me think of though is that, as a listener to any music, we want to be surprised.
Yeah.
We don't want to be like, oh, yeah, there's that thing again, every time. And so I think we do pretty good at trying to keep what we're creating really fresh. And even if people might not, is this too weird? People might not get it. Let's do it and try. And then you bring them back into something they can really hold on to.
Yeah. That's the thing with a lot of the music today. I think when I listen to it, I don't feel a groove in it. How do I explain it? If you listen to a Led Zeppelin, or I'm thinking I would listen to one of the reasons I love the Black Crowes is there's a groove in that music that you feel that even though it's not dance music, you just want to move.
Right.
And I think today's music is very flat, and I don't feel the groove in it as much.
Yeah. Maybe it's I'm recognizing a lot of what feels just formulaic.
Yeah.
You could almost, you don't have to know the song to know where they're going next.
Yeah. Well, because they, what's the thing is that they keep saying it's the same cabal of people who write the songs. There's 13 people who write the same songs, and it's always the same chord progressions, and it's this and that, and you're like, it all sounds the same,
Verse, chorus, verse, chorus.
There's some stuff out there.
That's it. Chorus. Oh, chorus one more time.
We went to Bourbon and Beyond. We camped there for 4 days last year.
Okay.
And we saw a couple artists I'd never heard of that pretty much blew our minds. Fantastic Negrito was one. There's a guy.
Super interesting, fun, funky.
Yeah, like that. It's new. Now he's not young. And so maybe he comes from more of our generation of like having that feel. His drummer was amazing. And he just was so incredibly soulful. And it had the elements of blues, elements of rock, some elements almost like of hip hop, but then you'd have these old like Negro spirituals like woven into that stuff. It was really wild.
You say that. Can I tell you something funny? So I'm a music educator. Did you ever hear, of course you have, King's X's Music Over My Head?
Oh, yeah. Probably their most popular all-time song, yeah.
Did you know that's a spiritual?
Yeah, that his mom.
I did not know it.
Yeah.
Like I'm looking through like my kid's book for songs and I come across Music Over My Head and I'm like, what?
Yeah. He tells that story live about hearing his grandmother, I think, sing it in her bed.
See, I didn't know, like I knew he said she would sing something, but I didn't realize that it was an actual real spiritual that she was singing. So sorry to interrupt.
And it is
we
always.
We just saw him sing that recently.
Yep.
Yeah. You saw him when they came to town?
Neighborhood Theater.
Yeah. All right. So, all right, we'll get to other stuff too, but what did you think? I thought, my personal opinion, I don't know who they had operating sound that night, but it was awful.
And you could tell Doug was fighting it the whole night. It's the most uncomfortable I've seen Doug in a show. You know, he's usually just so relaxed and so we're big fans of neighborhood theater. We love live venues. But this is a change from their original theater setup. You know, they expanded out the side and they've put this new PA system in.
Oh, okay.
And I've yet to hear a show there that I feel like sounds very good. And I don't know what the deal is with that room. And it's not a criticism, except that I think I, as a listener and someone who really appreciates great audio, it was frustrating that one of my all-time favorite bands.
I couldn't even hear Ty playing. I was like, "What? Why isn't he up front? Why?" He kept sitting back too, like he pushed him back. And there was no light on him, and I was like,
"Yeah."
You kind of feel. So I've seen. I don't know how many times I've seen King's X, maybe 20 times or something like that. I mean, I've seen him so many times, and it is probably the first time I've ever seen where I could tell Doug was ready for the show to be over almost pretty quickly, just because he complained about the sound numerous times, and he asked them to get rid of that, whatever that like honky.
He's like, I hear this pitch between this.
He knew the frequency and everything. I mean, those guys know that stuff so well. They didn't change it, and you could tell they just at that point they realized, oh, this is how it's going to be, and so it just didn't have that same fire or spark. But when they went to Over My Head, it is a moment every single show that delivers because of the power of that.
Yeah.
That song every time gets me. It just sends chills down my arms when he just starts doing that, when he just starts singing that line improvisationally and that melody starts wafting in the room, and then you know what's about to happen.
Yeah. There's always that moment, oh my God, now I can't think of the song, where everybody sings. They just play the instrumental part and know the whole crowd sing.
Yeah, from Out of Silent Planet. I can.
Thank you. Now I don't feel bad.
It's a girl's name.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'll think of it at some point. But that's the moment where you're just like, everybody's singing along just this song. They don't even have to sing the lyrics.
Yeah.
You know, such a great band. Criminally underrated.
It's funny. So you were talking about Black Crowes earlier. There's a connection between those two bands, and it's Brendan O'Brien. My probably one of my all-time favorite producers. So Brendan O'Brien got his start in production. He was an engineer on Blood Sugar Sex Magic for Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
And then he branched out and did the production of the first Black Crowes record. In fact, he played on Too Hard to Handle.
Hard to Handle.
Mm-hmm. He played the guitar solo on that.
Okay.
On that song, Brendan O'Brien. But probably my favorite King's X record, just sonically and song-wise, front to end, is Dogman. And that's Brendan O'Brien did that record. He produced that record.
Interesting. And he also did did he produce anything with the Black Crowes, or he just played on the solo?
No, he produced that first record.
Okay.
Yeah, I do think that record is what it is in large part because of his production ear, and he he takes that approach that let the band be the band, but I will help you draw out. Most bands are kind of have blind spots. They don't know what's working and what's not working, but they'll have some magic. Yeah. And a good producer will realize like when they've got the blind spots and when they need a little encouragement to bring kind of more of that magic out. And he was talking about, Chris, the singer from Black Crowes. Chris Robinson. He was saying he's never seen anything like that guy. He could go all day long for days on end and his voice just always sounded that soulful. And so it just made it a joy to make that record because you could get it to exactly what it needed to be. Yeah. And you never had to worry about wearing Chris out. And I'm like, that would be the dream.
Yeah. He was just on the Joe Rogan podcast and he said, forget who it was. One of the producers, it might have been O'Brien, said, he came to a show and he saw them recently and he laughed and he said, you know, Chris, if I knew that you were going to be singing these songs 30 years from now, we would have dropped it down a gear or two for you to be able to sing it a little easier.
Well, and then so King's X, they've lowered their keys over the years.
Yeah, Doug's 70-something years old at this point, you know?
And he still delivers. He sounds so amazing. Brendan O'Brien talks about Ty Tabor.
Criminal underrated guitar player.
So here's a guy who is probably like out of all those like shredder guitar players. Talk about somebody who brings a real sense of melody and just this other very artistic aesthetic to like shredding type playing. I mean, just amazing type playing. Brendan O'Brien said that when they were doing Dogman, Ty was so good, he was too relaxed, and Brendan felt like he didn't have enough fire in his playing. So he went out and got some cheap guitars and made Ty play his solos on these cheaper, harder to play guitars to just bring some fight out of the guy. You know? And I was like, wow, that must be nice being that good. You know, that like those solos are played on like substandard guitars.
I think that dude has just been around the block like so much and recording. And I mean, if you look at their output, it's not even just King's X. He's got his other bands that he plays with and other groups. Those guys are just always playing. Yeah. Just consummate musicians.
Yeah. And the thing I like about those guys is they can move from like jamming with the guys from Dream Theater, this Berkeley kind of prog rock stuff that's very, very complex. And then, but at the same time go into a blues project. Yeah. And it all sounds authentic. That probably is my all-time favorite band is King's X.
I love them. They're up there for me, but still it's Zeppelin. All time. If I have to pick something, it's Zeppelin. It's just not even a comparison.
Yeah, Desert Island Band. Yeah. If you could only listen to one band.
If I had two, first was Zeppelin. Oh God, I don't know. Let's see, Zeppelin, Black Sabbath. Probably have to go with 3. I don't know. I don't know who I would put at 3. It's those two guys, two bands for me. That I'm just like. There's nothing.
We lately have been listening to the latest Spoon album.
I don't even know who that is.
Oh, Spoon.
Oh my gosh. You're gonna love them. You will love this band.
Are they an old band or are they?
They've been around for a while, but
like 30 years or so. They're a Texas band. You know, there's this whole scene there in Austin where you've got bands that like have successful careers, but a lot of people don't know who they are. Right. But they have really branched out. They've toured with Beck, Cage the Elephant. They were at Bourbon and Beyond, kind of early in the day. But we've seen them. The best place to see them is a small club, but because they're mind-blowingly good.
That reminds me of a band that's coming to town. Going to see them. They're originally from Louisiana. They're a local band in New York, from Long Island, called Zebra, and they had some mild success in New York.
Who's Behind the Door?
Yes, perfect. There you go. Oh, that first album is just perfect.
Yeah, they were a great band. You know, it's interesting. I've actually played with that bass player because
Felix Hanneman.
Yeah, so Deep Sky opened for Zoso, and he plays in Zoso.
What?
Yes, he does. He plays bass and the keyboards for them.
I didn't even know that. Oh my God.
Yeah, so we were there and I
saw them a couple of years ago. I didn't even recognize him.
He looked very, very familiar, and then so we just all were chatting back in the green room.
Interesting.
And then he starts talking about, I was in this band, Zebra, and I was like, what? Like, dude, I used to binge on your videos. Yeah. Because they were just like super mysterious and great music.
The second album, they put out the first album. Of course, what do they say? Your first album, you have your entire life to make. Mm-hmm. The second album was rushed by Atlantic because the first album was so well received. So they had to put it out super fast. And then they said, I have a documentary about it. And the singer, Randy Jackson, who does Led Zeppelin cover stuff, like with symphonies and stuff, which is pretty, because he's got a tremendous high range. We're used to. Now he's in his late 60s. I don't think he can hit that stuff anymore. Like he used to, but I guess I'll find out. He said the Atlantic rushed the next album and they didn't get behind it.
Yeah.
So it got so then, and then they lost whatever momentum they had off the first album.
That's too bad. I hate to see something like that, especially with people who are so talented.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, it happens all the time.
Isn't that a little bit of, when you think about doing your recording yourself and not having maybe that pressure, and yet what you were talking about earlier and having a producer who might be able to push for a little bit more of that magic or find your blind spot or whatnot. It's like, for our next record, we do wonder, what do we do? Do we do it all ourselves again? Do we send off the stems? Do we have Brian Jones come back and record?
Or even something outside of the box.
Or go to a studio.
Yeah. I mean, for Flame Tides, for you guys, I mean, that's why I liked you guys. Like the second I heard you sent me the stuff and I listened to it, I was like, you guys have that groove, which I dug. It's kind of got this almost 70s kind of vibe to it, which I really liked. But I'm going to take you more modern now. I've got to ask you, how are you guys navigating our local Charlotte scene? Because it's changed a lot. I mean, I remember when I got here, it was, I don't want to say good old boys network, but maybe it was. There was more just local folks playing here, and our city has grown a lot. So how are you guys navigating the local scene? Where are you playing? Are you playing out much? What's going on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's definitely changed. Since, of course, 2020 also changed the landscape of people even wanting to be out in a venue with other bodies. Yeah. But we play a fair amount. We try and kind of get around. Petra's definitely play there enough that they will they'll have a band set up that'll hit us up and say, hey, we're playing at Petra's. We're a touring band. We'd like you guys to play with us. We play at Hattie's a fair amount. They don't really have live music there anymore, but it's a
bottle shop. What is it?
Yeah, it's a tap and tavern.
Hattie's, yeah.
And basically, Jackie's just allows us to play for a night because we have a lot of people show up for that kind of neighborhood scenario.
You guys do Tommy's?
Play Tommy's, love Tommy's. Appreciate those guys so much.
Yeah, he and Buck at the Milestone really keep live music, live rock and roll rolling pretty good. I mean, those guys are heroes.
Where else have we played lately? I think there's a kind of a flow that tends to happen where it's if we haven't heard from somebody asking us to play for a while, I just start sending messages to people like, hey, Flame Tides would like to have a show. When can we do that?
Hit me up the next time you guys play, because I mean, if I'm not gigging that night, I'd love to come see you guys play.
So our next show is October 22nd at Petra's.
Yep.
Let me look at the calendar.
It's like a Tuesday night. We're playing with a touring band called Wakey Lee.
October 26th? Is that what you said?
22nd.
Oh, it's a Tuesday. It's 22. Like a... All right.
Yeah.
And I think we're the second of three bands.
We played we played Women Rock for Women's Rights festival that was at...
I'll talk to you later about it and put it in my calendar.
At a brewery.
Yeah.
And, of course, Bright Fire Festival. Yeah. Elizabeth hit us up for that one. She was so kind to kind of chase me down a little bit, and so glad that we had that opportunity. So we want to play more. We'd love to play at least once a month.
Do you guys find that there's or I do at least, a division in Charlotte between original and cover music? Because I mean, I've gotten to see a lot of people because I'm in the cover scene.
Yeah.
You know, and it's particularly, acoustic. Yeah. That acoustic scene, I know a batch of people in that. Mm-hmm. I only know a smattering of people doing original stuff.
Sometimes it feels like
in that scene.
Hey, do we want to make money? Maybe we should do some covers.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, at this point, I always people laugh at me, and I'm like, I do all my other music stuff, original stuff, recording and putting that stuff out, and that's my artistic side. But when I want to make some money, it's
well, you look at, money. 90s rock bands are still doing great. They just come in the form of a tribute band.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's like, so you've got And they're great. I'm not knocking it. I don't know that I could do that. But people still really like that music. And we ask ourselves, okay, so is there a way to tap into that audience a little bit? We haven't really quite figured that out. Some of it's, there's not a lot of pressure on us financially to we have other income streams from other endeavors. So we don't focus too much on that, and we're not really having to get our hustle on.
And when we play, we enjoy playing our original material, so that's what we want to represent.
Well, that is God. All right, make us feel bad, but that is the nice thing about being a little bit older. Like most of us probably have another income stream, and the music that we can do what we want to supplement everything. Yeah, like I've said before, I teach elementary music, so that's what I do during the day. So I've got my solid income, so that affords me to record when I want, do what I want, but extra money going to gig on a weekend and playing covers. That helps. But my artistic side is satisfied recording where I don't feel the need at this point to go out and do my original stuff, where you guys are totally original. And to satisfy that artistic thing, you're like, I need to go perform my stuff, you know? So.
And, really, I just try with my own business and with our band. I just try to keep getting the word out and utilizing the social media as much as possible. And, we've got our own audiences, so just kind of hitting our friends up individually, and then of course the more people show up at a show, the more we will make at the end of the night. They split the door or whatnot with the other bands, and so that's enough. It's rewarding.
Do you know a lot of the original bands on the scene? Do you run in those circles, kind of?
A little bit.
We've got a fair amount of connections for sure.
Yeah, there's
well, you can be a tattoo artist. I'm imagining you get a ton of people that come in just for, conversation comes up just from tattooing.
Definitely.
There's Taylor Winchester, somebody comes to mind that's doing pretty well, doing all original stuff. He does some Dead covers and things like that in the mix, but like he just played the amp. He opened up for a yacht rock band, Thurston Howell. And
I know Pete. Who's in that
group. That's right. Yeah, our friends Eric and Gigi.
Yeah.
We stay up with them, and Jason Atkins, and
I just ran into Greasy Keith. So some of the people, and I've gotten to meet a lot of people like yourselves who I might not bump into because I do the podcast. So now my circle of musicians in the Charlotte area has widened. Yeah.
Greasy Keys, he seems to be almost single-handedly has really helped kind of the local music scene because he's everywhere. And then he does those, it's all-star kind of nights.
He's doing a podcast thing now. We talked about it. Yeah.
Cool.
And so, he's a tremendous player. I mean, I've actually played with him before, and his intuition is so good. He's dead on. You show him something one time, and he's a true studio artist, in terms of being able to hear something once and then know all of the changes and be able to recreate that.
He actually played on my EP.
Okay, super cool. Yeah. Yes, and we played, we wrote, was it like 4 songs? We did some recording with Eric Lovell in the Blue Bubble, with the singer Deirdre Croner. I'd mentioned her earlier from Grown Up Avenger stuff before she moved to England. We did just a short little project of those few songs called Howl Mary, and you can Jason played on a few of those songs, play some keys on there.
And he's doing, he's going to come on my podcast later this year or for early next year. But
fantastic,
man, he was already on like a couple of years ago, but how his career has kind of opened up a lot more since he's with the Greensboro Grasshoppers, the Charlotte Knights, and the Kannapolis Cannonballers, and the hockey team. Like he's got that. I'm like, dude, you couldn't wish it happened to a nicer person.
Yeah, so nice.
You know, that like, this is a guy's like, for a musician, could you imagine like a better steady gig than like these big sports stadiums to be able to have that happen for you, you know?
Yeah. So I always wonder for someone like that here, this is something so one luxury we have is we're in a band. It's our band. It's all original.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the only thing we do. We have a couple other side endeavors here and there, but not really much musically. And someone like him who's so talented, I would imagine it'd be very hard for him to commit to like a single band. So let's say, somebody want to bring him on, then like these other revenue streams he's got to make a very tough decision. Does he turn those off so that he can go out on the road with somebody?
Right.
And I'm glad, I'm glad to have never had to make those kinds of choices, because they're tough choices.
I don't know. Maybe that's something to ask him, because that's he may be a different animal in that sense where he's not, I know he used to play in a band when he first when he started out, but I think he might be that person who's just so used to playing in different situations and doing studio stuff and doing all these other things that I don't know if he's that kind of person where he would want to be like, I want to be in a band. I'm a band guy.
Yeah.
Right.
And there are people who are band people.
Yeah.
And there are people like, nope, I just want to do stuff by myself. I don't want to be bothered with 20 other people and making decisions.
Yeah.
So I'm curious with you guys though, the current situation we were just talking about in Charlotte with the music scene and where you're playing, how are you guys navigating social media for yourselves? That seems to be a thing for everybody.
I do it.
I'm terrible at it.
Because you guys, I don't see a regular website for you guys.
Yeah, for the band, we don't have a website. We kind of have it here now.
A URL for the band name that somebody kind of helped us with that for a little while. Yeah, and it just was it's so much work.
It's hard for my studio. I've got multiple artists, and I want to have a lot of information out there in a really clean way that is a website. But it feels like for the bands, just really the Facebook and Instagram and popping up a poster every now and then. It's really just doing that and continuing
really basic.
Yeah, just more, I've just find the regularity is what guides the visibility, and so just trying to play that game a little bit.
Well, I just saw you followed me on Instagram, so I had to follow back. So, but I mean, it's interesting to talk to musicians who are a little older than that, teenagers or whatever in their 20s who are always on social media. It's like, how do we navigate this? And I think there's a certain part, and we may have alluded to it earlier, we don't really care because we're local musicians and we are doing our original music, and it's not my main source of income. So I'm not feel like I've got to make it, I'm doing this because I enjoy it.
Yeah, we've definitely found, so we'll play around with, okay, do we put up a video for our sharing, just an image? Do we put a picture of the dog? Sometimes that gets more action. Yeah. And then for invites to shows, we find we go even more old school and literally just text people.
There you go.
Yeah.
And that's old school texting now, right?
Yeah.
You're texting here.
I remember the days in which we would play a show, and this is in the 90s. And you would have someone walk around with a clipboard, and you would get people's email address, and we thought that was very advanced at the time. So then we would do those email blasts, and now I'm sure if you walked around with a clipboard, people would be like wondering if, what kind of cause you're having to sign up for.
Yes. Yeah, don't take my information.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think it's a difficult thing to navigate. I do it anyway, I'm playing regularly with shows and stuff, and people, not that I have a massive crowd come see me, but I do have friends and people I know like, when are you playing? I'm like, just go to the website, here's my website, go check it out. Here's the events calendar.
I'm managing, my own personal, the band and the studio. So I'm just like, it's a little trifecta of make sure you share this thing that's going on through these other pages and try and just keep it.
Which I very much appreciate, by the way. I can't, I must be really old school because I'll get on Instagram and within a couple minutes, I'm just ready to back off of it. There's not, I don't know why, it just doesn't have much appeal, and same with, Facebook. So we have both pages, but and then at some point we're like, oh, we really should have a TikTok, and then
I can't do it.
And then I just kind of felt like I don't want to be a content creator. The content I want to create
That's the problem.
Is in
the actual
in that record.
Music.
That's the content I want to create. So the rest of it becomes a little bit of a conundrum in terms of, okay, so we've created content, but how do you get that out there? And I just haven't worried about it too much. And if we only played to 20-some people who really dug what we're doing, I'm honestly just totally okay with that.
We've kind of just got it in our minds like maybe you make 1 or 2 fans when you play out, and that's good.
I mean, I think it's the kind of thing for musicians who didn't grow up in this modern social media era, grew up before it, and then you kind of ride the wave into it. like for me, I'm not trying to be like, this is what I had for breakfast. Look at me. I'm so famous. I'm just like, picture here. Here's a video from a gig. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm playing. The fun part for me gets to be like playing rock star.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to go get some new photos, promo photos taken. That's some fun stuff. Like,
totally.
Wow. I never would have thought when I was like a teenager, like, I would, be doing this kind of stuff. Like, this is super cool.
Yeah.
She mentioned Buren Foster. So he did all the photography on Bonfire Tsunami, and he is an amazing photographer. And that was fun. That was a lot of fun to have a photo shoot and to hear somebody who is great at their craft come up with these ideas. He had these crazy ideas where we set up a mirror ball, but we didn't have it spinning. And he put he sprayed the air with all this aerosol something and then took these shots.
I love that fishbowl shot.
Yeah,
if that's what it's called.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, and so you realize like there's real artists out there who are great at their craft, and then you get to experience that as opposed to doing a selfie with your phone.
Yeah,
that everybody does.
Yeah, I mean that's the difference of collaboration and putting out like an album like you guys did is like, well, I can't just have the music. My part is done almost. Like I need somebody else to do the other visual stuff.
Yeah.
And which puts together that whole project and it makes it something, that you're like, ooh, that makes an impact.
Yeah.
Like I was saying. So that's really cool. I mean, it's just something different, and I like talking to other musicians on the local scene and figuring out what everybody's doing and how they're navigating it.
It's a hard time, I think, if you wanted to make this a profession.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, it's always been hard, and it's like, so there's always been tons of, it's almost like being an NFL or an NBA player. You start out and you have this dream, and to get there is a very, very precarious path, and a very, very low probability that you're actually going to be successful at it. But I do think that for rock musicians, the rock is just a genre that just doesn't have traction anymore. It's still, you still hear it in commercials, and you'll still hear it on TV and movies and things. You'll still hear it. It has a place, but it doesn't have, when I was growing up, there was no, like, we didn't watch TV except for maybe a couple nights a week.
Yeah.
And we listened to the radio constantly, and then they would announce what concerts were coming, and they were rare. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, and so there wasn't a lot that would come through. And so it was such a big deal to go to a concert.
I think one of the differences is a lot of people start to think of music today in just the short span that it's been a big industry. Like since recording, like if you take, let's just say the golden age of musicians making a big living it's really from like, let's just say 1960 to 2000.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So 40 years. And I think people got so comfortable, like, it's my art and I'm making millions of dollars. Well, J.S. Bach was writing for somebody in a castle, getting paid and having to put out this much money, and he could just barely support him and his 10 kids and his wife, and we're like, well, I could record and I could do, but things have shifted and it's not like that anymore. So musicians have to find other ways to do stuff. I mean, I think we always will.
Yeah.
But I think we hit that golden age of that 60-year span of like when it was. And even with rock music, I mean, jazz had its time. It was huge.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of like.
Kind of a niche.
Yeah.
Niche thing.
It's in the universities now. It's a studied art, which who knows, maybe rock and roll will be that way. And, in another 20, 30 years, it'll be like, we have to study, the music of Led Zeppelin and the Beatles. And we have to see how Motley Crue came up and study this area, this time, this decade.
All the tendrils that stretched out.
It's probably really a wonderful thing that you have this podcast and are communicating with those questions and, getting other musicians' voices to think about that. Because I feel like we're on that verge of that next chapter of however we're going to create this way of being musicians with our community again.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it got kind of selfish for me. Like, it started like, well, I can promote myself. But then it was also like, I can meet other musicians and I get to know everybody in town, you know, and you start to meet them. But then also in the recent years, I've started being like, well, I've kind of started thinking a bit more of documenting the local scene here, you know, because there's guys who've been on the podcast who have passed away. And then there's people who have been on the podcast who are really started really great, but their band's not together anymore, but they're still around. And I like to see what's going on in the scene. And maybe, you know, who knows if somebody is interested in Charlotte before they move here, they can be like, is there something that covers the scene? Oh, wow. There's all these groups on the scene. Who's here? You know, who do I need to contact? What's the studios? What's, you know, just different stuff. So it's nice to document it. And people always ask me, oh, you should branch out and you should get fans. And I'm like, I could, but I want to talk to the people that are here. You know, I could try to get, you know, a touring band that's coming through and go talk to them, but I think the people here are more interesting.
You're promoting, and I think you're promoting something that is where all art originally came from, which is culture.
Yeah.
So, and the modern phenomenon of music making people millionaires would look very, very odd to anybody who was a musician for the vast history of humanity.
Yeah.
You know, and it was more, you served the local area in some way if you're a musician, and in a variety of ways depending on where you were in the world. And that culture grew up, and then you see how that you have American blues music influencing a handful of British guys who get a hold of these records, and then they play that music for America, and it's the British invasion. Yeah. You know, and then that explodes, and all of a sudden that thing that was just really a very localized culture of music of people who would have never dreamed that they could have ever made any money with it, all of a sudden, you know, just takes off like wildfire. And I imagine that same story will repeat sometime in the future. It's probably not in America. It'd probably be some other kind of cultural phenomenon that happens. I mean, K-pop is probably a decent example of that. You know, here's these group of young, hungry, very driven people in South Korea who take all these hip hop influences, all these pop influence, house band, all this kind of stuff that you'd never think of weaving together. And like, they've created something pretty cool with it. It's not my favorite, but I listen to it and I'm like, it's really good. Yeah.
Well, it's very processed in a sense, you know, and there's something to it, you know. But the music, in a sense, to me now is almost like politics. It's all local. Like, you're not going to get an artist who just pops out and from nowhere. They generally, I would think, you have to do something in your area and get known for it. Right. You can't just put out a single and all of a sudden it hits the, you know, radio waves. People start to get to know you in your scene and support you, and then you, at least traditionally, you branch out and you become regional, and then you start to build there. So, you know, if we can give somebody a spotlight, you know, like guys like you coming on and talking about all the stuff that Flame Tides does, you know, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I've been really obsessed with Stevie Ray Vaughan's story of how he got his start, but not just where Stevie Ray Vaughan got his start, but this idea of Texas guitar blues, you know, going back, and then realize it really goes back to the same thing we talked about that was spurred the British invasion, which was Blind Lemon Jefferson. So you've got this Texas musician that nobody really knew about, but he focuses on singing and using the guitar to play this blues music, which is very different than like Memphis blues or Chicago blues or something where you have a lot other players. It's you're back down to like the gunslinger kind of idea, which is a very Texas kind of thing. Yeah. You know, and then you have Johnny Winter, who I didn't really realize how huge his career was. I was never a big fan, but you start looking at where Stevie Ray Vaughan came from and you realize there's this long Lightning Hopkins. Yep. You know, you see this long thread that runs all the way through, and then you see Stevie Ray Vaughan, who starts playing Antons when he's like 16, 17 years old with all these older guys, and just makes such an impression. And then they play, I think it was at Monterey Jazz Festival, and then Jackson Browne sees them. Yeah. And it's like, I got to bring those guys in, opens up his studio, and they make that first record, Texas Flood, and it just blows up. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everybody's got a little story to them, and that's why I like doing the podcast, is because I can talk to you guys, and you guys all have a background.
Hayley's got a background, how she got into music. Mike's got a background, and you start to see these little threads of how connects everybody. We all came into music in maybe a certain similar way, or maybe somebody was a little farther out and how they got into it and what inspired them. And it's great. I mean, it's very inspiring to hear other people's stories and how they do it. And it makes you think, wow, everybody has a story.
That's right.
You know, everybody's got something. You talk to your friends, whether it's not about music or whether it's about what they do. They could tell you stuff that's going on in their lives, and everybody's got something to say. We could all write an autobiography about ourselves.
True that. Yeah, so many layers to the human experience.
Yeah, it is. Hey guys, as we start to close things out, I'm going to go to Hayley because she covers all the social media stuff. How do we get in touch with you guys at Flame Tides, Hayley?
So you can definitely follow our Instagram or Facebook. Instagram is Flame Tides, all one word. And you can be our friend. You can like our stuff. Definitely engage with us. We'd love to meet new people. And
you should like them because they're awesome.
Like us, follow us, listen to us. We've got some videos on YouTube as well. Flame Tides. It's just Flame Tides. On YouTube. Some lyric videos that we created, and then trying to just put up clips from shows and stuff, and we'll continue to update that pretty regularly as we play.
Awesome. And you guys have any shows coming up in the near future? We'll be releasing this in, oh my goodness, probably November, December. Do you guys have stuff coming up, or looking forward to 2025?
So right now we've just got that October 22nd show, but I'm sure we'll put some more dates in there.
We don't have anything on the books right now. We're thinking about plowing back in to making another record. We've got a fair amount of new material, but we're on that. We're at that fork in the road trying to figure out that, we talked about the blind spot earlier. Yeah. Would it be beneficial to bring in somebody from the outside as a producer who we could really trust, and have them help us interpret what it is that we're doing with newer material, and maybe, find some avenues that we haven't thought about. And even sonically, I'll get in a little bit of a rut sonically thinking that I really want a particular sound. Right. And sometimes it's helpful for somebody to just take that and look at it from a different perspective.
Definitely playing shows out, helps us help get a vantage point of our own band and our own sound and stuff too. So definitely trying to keep those shows rolling while also spending some time at home. Yeah. Jamming and making up new shit.
Well, if I had that studio you guys had, I'd be doing that same thing. So yeah. Awesome. Well, guys, it was great meeting you and getting to sit down and talk with you for a couple of hours.
Same here.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys, take care.
Thank you.
Bye. You too. Thanks for listening to episode 80 of the Queen City Music Podcast, and I hope you go back and check out past episodes. And if you've enjoyed the podcast, please share it with your friends. As always, if you have an idea for an episode or would like to be a guest on the QCMP, reach out to me at qcmusicpodcast@gmail.com. Also, check out our local partners, Records on the Wall at rexonthewall.com, Reporting from 20XX at reportingfrom20xx.wordpress.com, Queen City Live at instagram.com/Queen City Live Music, and Charlotte New Music at charlottenewmusic.org. Until next month, get out there and support the local Charlotte music scene by hearing some of the talented artists who call our city home.